Welcome to New York Bio's Virtual Breakfast Series, a digital program featuring fireside chats with leaders from across the healthcare spectrum. We have a double feature this week, bringing you Mary Howard, the program director at the Bio and Health Tech Entrepreneurship Lab in New York City, commonly known as eLab, and Dr. Josep Bassaganya, the founder and CEO of Landos Biopharma, which was an early eLab company.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hawks-Bland, and I'm the CEO at New York Bio. Welcome to our virtual breakfast series. As we've been doing for the last, I think this is maybe 6 weeks or so of our virtual breakfast series with our different guests, and we're going to continue to do them. So what I have for you today, a little update. It looks like New York is finally making strides across the state. Last week, I think I told you that upstate was opening up, and now downstate. So the Westchester area and the lower Hudson Valley opens today, meaning that construction, retail pickup, those sorts of things are on track. It looks like the Long Island and the city are not very far behind, which is great news as far as opening our economy. In fact, I believe the governor is ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange this morning because the NYSE floor is back open with traders. So these are sure signs of life from an economic perspective, and I think that it's we're grateful that we're starting to make some normalcy strides. Here at New York Bio, we're going to continue with our digital offerings. We're probably not going to have things in person for a while now. Next, we're looking forward in person to our annual meeting, which was rescheduled from March 10th to September 14th. So stay tuned for more information on that. And in the meantime, the one thing that is also going on, which happens every year, is the Bio International Convention. And a lot of you have gone to the convention before. This year, it is all digital. So we hope you'll join us. Derek and I are attending virtually. And we've also provided scholarships to 7 New York Bio member companies to participate on the digital convention with partnering. So we hope you'll join some of our member companies there as well. And now I'm going to turn it over to Derek to introduce our 2 guests today. And we invite you to just enjoy the conversation, ask questions. We have 2 ways to do that. There is at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat feature or a Q&A feature. So shoot the questions over. We're glad to have those and to field them throughout the conversation. Thanks.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a great long weekend. I'm excited to continue this today. I've been in New York for close to 14 years. And, you know, one of the big things I think about is how New York City has evolved over that time. And we've given a slight programmatic evolution this morning where we now have not 1 guest, but 2. Mary Howard, who has headed up eLab since its inception in 2012. And Josep Bassaganya, who's the founder and CEO of Landos. So now we have multiple guests on the webinar this morning. Landos was an eLab portfolio company. And I'm excited for what we're going to get into this morning. We had a great pre-discussion on Friday. And I'm glad we can open up after the long weekend with this. So Mary and Josep, why don't you guys take turns just giving a little bit of background about yourselves, and we'll get into it.
Thank you. Joseph, do you want to go first?
No, go ahead, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm very pleased to be here this morning. Thank you so much, Derek and Jennifer, for including us in this program. We've got a pitch day coming up next week, which is a highlight of our program. And we're very happy to be here and share some of the background with the group that's come. I recognize a lot of names, people who have been supporting this program as corporate supporters, as mentors, as alumni, and it's something that we all miss so much, is to be able to see these familiar names and faces and get together. So thank you for making this possible for us this morning. We really appreciate the opportunity. The eLab was set up as an invitation by one of the people here on the line, Jahan Ali, to Lindsay Harcum, to create a program for research scientists to start ventures in New York. My background was not in life sciences, and but it has been a serial entrepreneur, and I had benefited greatly from a very strong community helping people who really didn't have much of a sense of how to build a company to learn how to build it and to be supported by others. And that was the privilege that we got a chance with the initiation of the program by New York City EDC to do with eLab. And Joseph was in one of the early cohorts. So it's very much of a pleasure to have somebody who has been in the program and knows it firsthand to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Thanks, Derek, for inviting us. Interestingly, I'm not in New York City, I'm in Virginia. And we stumbled into Mary and her wonderful program, the eLab, in 2015, 2016, when one of our business development people in one of the previous companies, Biotherapeutics, lived in New York City. I'm a serial entrepreneur. My background is in biotech and immunology in particular. Over the last 20 years, I've spent my career building computational and mathematical models of the immune system to develop more predictive therapeutics or new products. And we were incubating a variety of ideas when I first met Mary under a company called Biotherapeutics, which had three main angles: the nutraceuticals angle, the advanced computational modeling, and a very emerging therapeutics program. We came to the conclusion that those were separate business models. And right now we have a company that is commercializing nutraceuticals. So we have products in the market under that company, under the Pervida brand. We have a computational engine in biotherapeutics, and we have developed, as Mary and Derek pointed out, an emerging biotech biopharma company called Landos Biopharma, which I founded in 2017. And we've made quite dramatic progress over the last 3 years, from the initial concept, very early preclinical stage, understanding of immunometabolic pathways, to a phase 2 clinical trial right now, which hopefully will transition to phase 3 next year. So we are excited about the concept of entrepreneurship applied to biotech, but also applied to consumer products and other kinds of businesses, which ultimately require separate business models and separate approaches. But we've learned a lot. We've leveraged. What we like about the eLab is that as opposed to focusing on an academic perspective to entrepreneurship, like how do you do the research, is how do you take that idea into the market? And I think that makes a huge difference, right? You build your business model to have a commercial success and not to have a scientific success. I think the scientific success is part of, and the clinical success is part of the commercial success. But it was a great platform and a great start. And I have to say that while we are in Virginia, we continue to have deep connections with New York. Currently, our medical director is working from New York, and we hope to strengthen those further. Thank you.
Okay, I can say that during the webinar we can't openly lobby to bring you back to New York, but behind the scenes we'll do everything that we can. So to go back a little bit, I want to kind of set the stage slightly here, because really, you know, you joined the program in 2017, and you know, for the edification of our other viewers, you know, Landos raised a $10 million Series A, led by Zontogeny and Perceptive Advisors. Last summer, they topped that up with a $60 million Series B. And as Joseph said, they've taken their lead candidate all the way through. They're in phase 2 now and looking forward to going into phase 3. So by virtually any metric of biotech progress, that's been incredible. So let's rewind the clock a little bit. You know, Mary, it's 2011. It's before 2000. It's, you know, the program started in 2012 by the Bloomberg administration, and it's 2011. And why don't you set the stage for some of the early discussions around, you know, Lindsay coming to you with this idea for the program? Where did everything start? What did you think of it, and what were your expectations going in?
Well, it was a situation where I had been in the city, and people had come to me and had said, look, you've raised money for your ventures. Can you just share who these people are, and then I can get my company going? And it's so much of a complicated process to get to the place where someone actually will write you a check. And we knew that we needed people to support this effort that would help build companies. That was really something that was a big part of the initial conversation, that this wasn't a course for postdocs to be able to learn about business, but rather a program to help launch businesses. And so the first thing was asking Lindsay if he would be willing to allow us to go and seek people from industry to partner with and get involved in the program. And this was a really unusual thing at that time. Now it's a lot more accepted, but they agreed, probably not knowing what it was we were talking about and being very generous about it. And Cindy Green, who's on the call, was at Pfizer at the time. And we explained, look, this is going to take a while. You're not going to see anything for 10 years. So you really need to be willing to hang in there for a long time before you see something. We're lucky. Josep joined the program, and there were many other talented people. Kresalan, Chandra Ghosh is on, Ashish Agarwal are on, many people who have just gone forward and built incredible businesses, but we never thought we'd see something like that. And people have moved on. We have had really incredible, loyal organizations. John Pennant, who's on the board, is on this from Eisner Amper. And Rana is on the board, and she's on from Pfizer. That continued support really allowed us to learn and change year by year by year. And it's both exhilarating, frustrating, exhausting to work on the program because every aspect of the community has changed every year. The universities have changed, the investors have changed. You expect the technology and the founders to change year to year, but we have just seen incredible dynamic in New York, and also even with a background in looking at acquisitions, looking at investment, which I did at Bain and I did for Kodak, and I've done for venture funders and angels. The way that companies are built now is incredibly fast. It's global, including funding, including distributed operations. And so it's really challenging to figure out how to provide a education program for people who haven't been in business. So it's really been an incredible community effort. We would never have been able to support these ventures without a lot of the community pitching in and being willing to support each other. And that's just what we've seen. And over time, we're seeing entrepreneurs as alums. Mark is on here. Luis Tiranoff, Luis Santos, they just come back and now they're supporting others. And the expectation is that this is a community program. Jules Mitchell is a very proud New Yorker. He talks as much to me about how do you get the community support, how do you solve education, housing costs to allow these ventures to go as we talk about, how do you provide a curriculum? It's very, very deep concern for how do you build this business and take care of the people who are these really unique individuals we get a chance to meet with. Yeah,
no, I remember it's good to know that it's a very, very different time than it was in 2012. I remember vividly what it was like then, and funnily enough, origin story of this for me, I was on NewYorkBIO's boat cruise in the middle of the summer, and Rafi from the EDC was in the way that he does, was gesticulating and telling me all about this new program that they were going to try and put together. And at the time, there were really no formal options for any sort of entrepreneurial education for postdocs and graduate students. And anybody that's been around New York City for long enough gets to be able to recite all of the assets that everyone commonly ticks off. You start with the fantastic top flight academic centers, and eventually you get down to the fact within the top 5 somewhere that I believe New York has basically the largest population of postdocs and graduate students just about anywhere in the world. And they've been this body that has been really, really eager and really aggressive, and I think with all of the right reasons to explore the types of things that they could do with the great science that they do out of academia in New York, or as we see with Adria, coming up from Virginia to New York for what became Landos. It doesn't really matter where they are. New York is kind of a magnet for that kind of talent. So Josep, why don't you talk a little bit about your kind of early experiences with the program? I think we can kind of go back and forth a little bit here, because ultimately I think what we're going to see is, I'd like us to kind of start from the genesis of the program and think about how things have evolved into now. And Landos is a really great story for that, because as you said, when Adria first came up to New York, so Adria Carbo came up from Virginia to New York, and I put this together the other day because Adria was one of the people that I met through the networking group that I had started. So a lot of this comes full circle. So Adria comes up to New York, and you said you basically had 3 business models instead of 1 when you started.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adria, by the way, was former PhD student of mine. He worked under what was called the Modeling Immunity to Enteric Pathogens program, which was a $12 million NIAID-funded program, one of the main Anthony Fauci programs at NIAID. And what we did was to build computational mathematical models for infectious disease. And so Adria was a genetics, bioinformatics, computational biology PhD student, stellar on the science side. But as you may tell, if you've met Adria, he's very good in interpersonal skills. He's a great scientist, but he's a better salesman. And so once he graduated, I very soon recruited him as scientific director of biotherapeutics. I felt that there was value, and he definitely accrued some value in Blacksburg. He did some key discoveries related to the computational aspects, the therapeutics program, but he realized, and him and I had a conversation, that while he enjoyed the science, he enjoyed much better interacting with people. And so I told him, how about we do something in order for you to continue to work for biotherapeutics? I'm going to move you into a business development position. You will not have to be in Blacksburg. I know that by that time his boyfriend was about to move to New York City. I said, you can do the business development work from New York City. And he was very pleased to do that. And that was actually the connection through eLab. He had some initial interactions with you guys. And then I also had the chance to meet Mary. I thought this is an extremely valuable program. And again, that initial interaction was under the auspices of biotherapeutics. That was the starting point of many ideas. I think will be the starting point of many additional companies to come. And there were aspects of the program that, for me in particular, were extremely helpful. In my case, one of the key aspects that I appreciate the most is that it helped unleash my inner instincts as an entrepreneur, right? So especially when you compare big pharma to biotech, you realize that big pharma it has a tremendous amount of resources, but moves very slowly. And the advantage of a biotech company is the ability to move fast in terms of creating innovation, from target discovery to accelerating drug development. And in order to accomplish that, you need to create a certain culture. an entrepreneurial culture. And each company has its own entrepreneurial culture. In the companies I've created, whether it's Pervida, Biotherapeutics, Landos, the underlying theme is 4 fundamental pillars: be bold and decisive, never give up, do the impossible, and be solution oriented. And I think within these 4 pillars, there's quite a lot of innovation that can happen. There's a cohesive team that push forward and makes things happen no matter what. And I think that was the basis for biotherapeutics. That's the basis for Landos. In fact, it's very interesting right now that we've become more formalized, where we have a formal procedure for hiring someone. We've added those 4 pillars in the recruitment, and we take those very seriously, because what is clear, and I'm not the first one to say this, and I will not take credit, but I'm certainly one of the people that applies it on a day-to-day basis, is that culture eats strategy for breakfast every day, right? So you need the strategy, you need the tactics, but more importantly, you need that culture, and you need to succeed with the small business that has the vision to become a global company. You need that entrepreneurial spirit. And so eLab was able to unleash those instincts, and I'm less shy about showing those aspects after going through the program. Some people that are used to more certainty, that are used to a more traditional academic mindset, may not be totally aligned with that mindset. It requires certain personality, it requires certain attributes. But ultimately that is crucial, I think, not only to create a company, but to create an ecosystem that eventually results in a successful cluster. I mean, that's how Boston started, that's how San Francisco started. You're not having the academic institutions alone will not create that ecosystem by itself. You need those academic institutions, you need that grant funding from NIH and other sources, but more importantly, you need those key entrepreneurs that will push the envelope and will make things happen. And I think that eLab is instrumental in facilitating that for New York City and for other areas. So I'm very appreciative of Mary's efforts and the eLab in general.
Yeah. Well, that's perfect, because really, you alluded to this before, Mary, and let's kind of go back and revisit it, where you talked about some of the folks that you have on your board, and you talked about some of the other people that you kind of brought in along the way. And, really what that is, it's like it's adding puzzle pieces, in addition to the entrepreneurs, in addition to the academic buy-in. You've assembled an amazing group of advisors and other people from the community that also get involved here. It's not like this is really an isolated learning environment. You actually have a lot of people from the community participate in the learning itself, and really, people, within the program also get, established and connected with other people in and around New York City when you do it. So maybe talk a little bit about that. Was that a feature from the beginning? How did the initial, kernel of those things start, and how has that facet of the program grown?
Well, thank you. It was really instrumental for me in doing my own ventures, was the community and the support by other entrepreneurs. And the idea was that if you could get advisors who you were able to, who first understood, the specifics. These are complex businesses, and it's not general business advice you need really specific technical support to get these businesses going forward. So first you have to find those people, but then if you can get people who kind of don't have an axe to grind, that they're there to help you, and that if you could assemble them and get them to work together, you would have an opportunity to take forward ventures, and that eventually these entrepreneurs would be supporting the next generation. So, there are people here who, if you've kind of gone through that experience of being an entrepreneur, you know how hard it is. And there were many generous people. Arthur Klausner's on this call right now who rose to, give back and give back and give back. We've had many people, Sam Consummate, he's not on this, but it's just there over and over again, year after year, to help the new ventures. So that came from a personal experience of having people who were a year, 2 years ahead of me tell me, that person who you're talking to really doesn't understand, the legal issues involved. They're very well known. It's a great firm, but that's not who you need. And that's going to reflect on you. I had to learn that from a community of people that I got to know when I was doing startups. And so it was very instrumental to have. So we've got a lot of rules about how you engage, and it's free, This could be our byline, free is the best price. And of course, nothing is free. It's been an incredible investment, right? From so many people. And that's really, but for a founder who really wants to see something happen, you are limited in your resources. So people do have to come together if you're going to be able to move this stuff forward. And we've we've learned a lot about that. And as the community has changed and grown, it's gotten more sophisticated. Now there are incubators. When we started, there weren't any. Blake Stevens from Launch Labs, when he came over, we had a chance to know him in his investment days, and that was really instrumental. Agata Magalinskaya, who is now at Launch Labs, she's on this call, really instrumental in helping the ventures have a place and vision where they could go afterward. We have, as they evolved, we had so much international business. We actually went and talked beyond some of the initial more local oriented law firms like Moses and Singer and Linda Malik, who's got this incredibly sophisticated, targeted group of lawyers, HIPAA, policy drafters, and Jill Anderson, who's got the legal background, who had done all of the clinical trial work for Dana-Farber. These real gems here in the community. We're needing to get additional support, because just as Joseph came from Virginia, we had people coming from out of the country to New York. They're comfortable coming to New York. They feel that it's a place that they can build a business in, they can raise money in. There's a community, a big community of people from the countries that they're from, but that also drove more complicated funding strategies, a lot more legal, transactional issues. And we were able to reach out to some national and global firms. Craig Kineski's here from Wilson Sonsini, who is able to provide a different level of support because the group is a sophisticated global group. So it's changed. And we've had to figure out, how do we support the evolving groups that are here?
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's, it's funny. You've mentioned so many. It's great to have all the people on the call that have either been through this. And it's funny you tick off the people that are our advisors and how that's evolved. And as you were talking about that, especially with maybe people early that were less helpful than you would want them to be, I think there are fewer valuable phrases as a very, very early entrepreneur than someone telling you not to do something. Don't go there, don't go down this hole. Not everybody appreciates the amount of time that goes into doing it the first time and making the mistakes, and then helping people not make the same mistakes that you did. It makes things that could be a very, very large time sink go away, and it makes it a much, much more efficient. This is a really good question from Andrew Koopman that just came in, and it's actually timely. And he says, since biotech is really a team sport, how do you approach the team building aspect in eLab, right? Because you start with solo entrepreneurs in the program, and for the most part, the people that are there don't have the money to hire someone else, right? So how do you think about team building, and how do you think about that from the standpoint of the program? How do you help people put other people around themselves before they have any money or resources?
You know, it's very, very hard. Team building is one of the hardest things anybody can do. So, you know, we start though with a lot of people who are solo, right? So, team may be going from 1 to 2, or it may be going from 2 to 1. You know, there are a lot of people who have not done this before, and they get into it and they realize, you know, it's really not for them. It wasn't what they thought it would be, or the way the work planned moves forward just isn't appealing to them. So team building is additive and subtractive, both. And one of the things that we do is we actively look at the corporate supporters and the mentors as key to that team building effort. You know, the idea is to have people work on things together and to use the time, which isn't a lot, it's 6 months at most, for ventures to have a chance to do work with other people and get a sense of themselves. What is it they really find important? And to be able to get to know different people and find people who are going to be helpful to them, that they find that they can actually get some things done with. So it's a more haptic than theoretical or intellectual exercise. It's structured so that people are actually encouraged to form companies, to undertake licenses. So these are all business activities. And when you work with people, you start realizing a little bit about yourself, which lays the groundwork for team building and thinking about, you know, what would it actually cost to keep going forward, and who do those people look like? For a lot of startups, you're going to have to hire consultants. You're not going to be able to afford full-time employees, and you know, it's complicated sorting through who they are and whether you can work with them.
Yep. Josep, what do you want to talk a little bit about some of the early kernels at Landos? So how did Landos go from Adria and 3 ideas to, you know, Adria and yourself and perhaps more people, and you know, at least in this iteration, a more singular idea?
Yes, absolutely. I think that even before Landos, because Adria was pre-Landos, we were very in a bootstrapping mode. And at that stage, we were accruing value in a very non-dilutive basis, which is interesting. One of the ways that Mary had recommended at early stages, it's basically through SBIR, STTR funding, small amount of funding, but if you can use it in the right way, you can actually begin to create a concept, an idea, prototype that eventually leads to some more significant funding. So the initial stages was SBIR, STTR. In 2016, I was trying to think how many people were in biotherapeutics. It was about 7. And Adri and I were one of them in Virginia. Adri was in New York in his business development role, but the majority of them were people that we had shaped, we had created, either former PhD students of mine or very stellar BS or master's students that were interested in taking a more practical way. I fully agree with Mary. There's no room for theoretical exercises. So in some cases, we put it in a less formal way. There's no room for bullshit, because really, if you lose that efficiency, you may go out of business. So it's a very serious thing that you need to do. So we started with that. We had these people funded with grants. And I think around that time, 2016, there was a governor in Virginia that was very supportive of biotech, Terry McAuliffe. He even pushed for Virginia, Maryland, DC becoming top 3 by 2023 in biotech. So he had a very ambitious agenda, most especially considering where Virginia was in biotech rankings. And I remember moving from that SBIR, STTR to beginning to develop the concept of Landos, founding Landos in January of 2017, and then starting to fundraise for the Series A. And I recall in some of the initial interactions with investors, some West Coast investors that were not into bullshitting either, said literally, what the fuck are you guys doing in Southwest Virginia, right? And so, because the concept that the biotech company was located in Virginia didn't compute in their brains. And then I think that when they were past that initial outlier mindset, they would go deeper in the technology and realize there's potential value and so on. And as you mentioned, luckily later this year, we're able to close a Series A round from Perceptive Advisors. Last year, we closed a Series B round from RTW, Perceptive, Osage University Partners, and some others. And that has allowed us to go from that 7 people, mainly funded through grants in biotherapeutics, to now about 27 full-time people, many consultants, and we have about 10, 15 open positions, including some senior positions, CMO, CFO, and so on. So we've come a long way. There's still a lot of growth that needs to happen, but the team building is an essential part of what entrepreneurs need to do. And if you mess it up, you are endangering the ability of the company to achieve its objectives. So I take that very seriously. We like to have a very cohesive team where everyone is rowing in the same direction. And I alluded, I hate to repeat myself, but I alluded earlier to the corporate culture. This is an essential way that brings people aligned and moving the same direction. Not only hiring the best people, but hiring those people that have that entrepreneurial mindset and that are very aligned with the corporate culture. And up until now, with about close to 30 people, we've been able to create a lot of the key positions, especially on the R&D and the clinical side. But we are at the stage where the growth is going to accelerate. And so we'll be facing a situation where we'll need to bring talent that is already trained and ready to go, turnkey solutions. And we will be exploring not only having some operations in Virginia, but possibly having operations in other places where that talent is already grown. And so I think that that's exciting, but nonetheless, we'll apply the concepts of team building that we've applied in the early stages that have worked so well. I would say in the key positions of Landos, everyone from the finance person to the head of clinical, the head of science, and so on, and business have been here from the very beginning. And I'm very fortunate to have the support of each and every one of those individuals to be able to not only meet, but to exceed the timelines over and over and over, so that we move forward and we help address those unmet clinical needs of patients with autoimmune disease.
Yeah. I mean, biotech is an amazing ladder in that way, right? Because you can, if you think about the stages even that you just went through, even in some ways getting grants and hiring 7 people is a pretty dramatic step up from, having 1 or 2 people at a start and a kernel of an idea. And then you have the step up to, bringing in basically top flight VCs in Chris and Perceptive. And then there's yet another step up of bringing in, a $60 million B round, which is simply incredible. So, and now you've kind of had the bar raised on you again, where everything accelerates even more. So it's definitely a challenging ladder, where as things evolve, the steps just seem to get harder. But ultimately, on the amazing side here, you have a scientific thesis that is, being borne out in clinical trials, and you've, transitioned to the point where you're trying to translate all of those discoveries to help patients, which is really, I think, what everybody wants to be a part of. So Mary, just on the theme of evolution here, as we're stepping up the ladder and things are growing, where do you see things going in the future, right? So you have the way that the program started was largely educational, right? And you now have something where you have people going through this experience, and the number of people that have achieved success and are really still involved with the program in a lot of ways. So what are the ways that you see this changing over the next kind of 5 or 10 years, because in as much as New York is different than it was in 2012, you know, something tells me it'll be different in 2028 when you would compare it to 2020. So what are really kind of some of the next things that you may see factoring into the program?
Well, it's really hard to predict how New York is going to change or this community is going to change. I think it's been a humbling experience every year to realize that when we start, by the time we get to spring and we're doing a pitch day, that we've already got a very different community we're working with than we started back in the previous September. But you know, all of that has resulted in us, you know, the amount of education we provide is up by a factor of 6 over the initial year when we provided 6 days of training. Now we have 6 days of training plus about 25 workshops that follow that. We're doing, instead of 13 events a year, we're doing close to 100 events a year. It's just an extraordinary amount of both more granular support to the teams, which we have, the only way we've been able to do that is add technology. So we've got lots and lots and lots of software and data that we're now working with. There's a lot of data analytics. We now do meetings with coaches that result in reports, that result in requests for mentorship. And we are trying to push that to a day turnaround. So we would never have been able to do that in the first year. But that's really because the ventures are more ready for engaging with commercial entities, with partners, with investors. Investors are more comfortable going earlier. They're seeing the risk reward being acceptable. That has forced us into a whole education, which we've undertaken now in the 3rd year with John Pennant and Eisner Amper to do due diligence. I mean, we didn't even need to do due diligence in the first 3 years. There wasn't any due diligence because ventures weren't getting funded. They were getting funded through grants. They were getting funded through foundations. They were, and they have been incredibly generous and supportive of eLab teams. You know, in the 2nd year, 7 of the 20 ventures were funded by patient foundations. So, you know, that's also a changing community. So,
absolutely.
You know, what do we see this year? We've seen some new things which we hadn't seen before. Doug Eunice from Monogram, he's a high volume hip replacement surgeon with Mount Sinai. He's got a surgical planning tool that is embedded with a robot assistance, which is embedded with a custom printed hip implant. So Doug just closed 18 million in a seed funding platform, a crowdfunding seed invest platform. 18 million was raised from 5,000 investors. So we've never seen that before. Is that something new? We're gonna be looking at that. We're gonna be looking.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And this is an MD. He's a practicing MD. He is the CEO, president of that company.
Think of how much he could have raised if he used the words artificial intelligence in the title.
I think he may have used those words. But, you know, there are other technologies that are coming along to support fundraising. There are other groups that are coming and looking at bio as a field to evolve into. So we expect that this will be a more and more dynamic area. If that means that companies are getting sold before they're expanding into full-blown companies with I think we're going to be looking at, you know, how do you help people get the support, the resources, and who are those new groups that are seeking to get involved in this? So, yeah. You know, there'll be changes.
So there's kind of 2 things to ask about, and one of this I'm gonna incorporate a question that Rich Allen just posted, and you know, Rich asked about, you know, things like how does New York do a good job of getting new ventures in newer areas like either cell and gene therapy, you know, gene editing, microbiome related therapies. I know, you know, Landos actually has a lot to do with the gut. So I think we probably have our share of folks focused on the gut, but I'm going to split the question, right? So the question is really, how does New York do a better job of, you know, bringing in kind of these new therapeutic areas? But my question really for the program is, you know, how do you think about the split between the folks that are going to be in either these new areas or more advanced, and also thinking about just the sheer number of applications that you get? So is there a point you think in the future where the program almost splits, where you have a bucket for folks that are, you know, either really early or in an ideation phase, and for folks that are a little further along?
Yeah, well, I mean, Rich's question is great. So a couple of things that just were astounding for us to realize. One, by the time we get through and pick 20 people, 20 ventures in eLab, we've met 200. So,
okay. And how many people do you start with on a, so 200 is about the bar for what you get in applications a year now?
Between people start reaching out about this time as they start hearing about pitch day, and between now and when we close applications, we'll have met 200 startups or people thinking about starting up ventures. Yep. The amazing thing to Rich's question is the breadth of the applications. You know, it was until like year 7 that we got a duplicate application for a technology. I mean, that meant we had seen 1,400 applications on technologies that were unique. We never anticipated the breadth of the technology, neither did New York City EDC. They thought we'd see only digital health, and we had a very, very small number of digital health ventures who got in until about year 7. We're now in year 8. And therapeutics, and the whole engineering community of New York, from Columbia, from CUNY, from NYU, Tandon, was just not on anybody's radar. So that's been extraordinary, and certainly Cornell, you know, with the Technion connection and the Upstate connection, has got a ton of engineering too. So, you know, the bench is really deep. And I think that even now, there's not enough appreciation. People talk about the science being equivalent to other places, but I think the appreciation of the breadth of the bench is just extraordinary.
You know, people, it's funny, having been involved in these conversations for well over a decade now. I always bristled at the notion that, you know, the people who would like to wave a magic wand and bring certain groups of people into New York. And I never really liked that assertion. I think New York has always had great people. I think they're people that have perhaps not had what is called the standard, you know, the standard experience of the venture-backed ecosystem, right? The folks that maybe go through a Boston or a San Francisco cycle a couple times. But, you know, I think the talent has always been there. I just think the resumes look different from what people are used to. So New York has always had things that are highly advantageous. And Josep, I'm going to bring this back to you for a second, because, you know, you're somebody who's now, you're in the middle of the clinic. Your company is advancing therapies, and there's always the need to raise additional capital. And I think one of the things that New York has that really nobody else has is Wall Street, right? There's capital in other places, but certainly not the type of capital that we have in the public market, certainly not anything that's as concentrated as we have. So in thinking about where your company wants to go next, can you talk a little bit about the consideration for, say, larger institutional finance outside of venture, whether it's public markets, whether it's, you know, institutional funding, in privates, but really the Goldmans and the larger players. Can you talk a little bit about how that environment is important to you as a company, and really kind of the access to those kind of folks that New York would provide?
Yeah, absolutely. Very relevant question. And the stage of development we are in is a very exciting stage. So our phase 2 will have proof of concept efficacy sometime soon, but as you know, clinical research is extremely expensive, right? So we raised 60 million that supports our phase 2 program in ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, multi-billion-dollar market, $6 billion UC, about $11 billion Crohn's disease, measure unmet clinical need. We have a very well differentiated asset, BT11, in that it's orally active, gut restricted, very limited systemic exposure, new mechanism of action, not connected to any toxicity. So it has all the ingredients that a very successful drug should have. And more importantly, it's the only drug in development that targets the mild to moderate ulcerative colitis patients, where there's about 75 to 80% of the UC population. All drugs could not go earlier in the treatment paradigm. And at this stage of development, what we need to do is grow, acquire more project managers with clinical project management expertise, more regulatory people, more medical people, and a key consideration as to where Landos, or a part of Landos, is going to be is access to this talent that will drive the next wave of growth of the company. And I have to say that New York, New Jersey area seems very exciting. There's biotech, there's biopharma, there's companies that have been acquired that could potentially be a source of talent that want to move away from that large biopharma, more rigid approaches back into the biotech system. So I believe the opportunities in New York are enormous. And now we are looking how to make that happen. Interestingly, before March of this year, I was spending about twice a month in New York City, talking with either my current investors, future investors, to address more directly your question, where is Landos going? Obviously, we are very happy to have the support of funds like Perceptive, like RTW. They are very supportive and they'll continue to be very supportive. But as we move to the next stage of growth, we'll need to look into institutional funds. We'll need to look into mutual funds that will be with Landos for the long term. And we'll need to look at some point, and I'm not saying when, into a transition from a private company to a public company. And when the conditions are ideal, we'll make that determination and that move. So access to Wall Street, access to the analysts, access to the investment banks is highly advantageous. And a lot can be accomplished now with virtual meetings. Zoom has become an essential tool, or other tools like Zoom, but I still like the face-to-face. I'm looking forward for this COVID situation to be under control, to be able to be back in Manhattan and have those face-to-face meetings. But the reality is we are motivated to have a more significant presence in New York City, and we're trying to find the ways to make it happen. That doesn't mean that we shut down operations in Virginia. I think Virginia offers still great opportunities for some of the things that Landos is doing, but what it means is that we can grow into what New York has to offer for certain kind of functions. So this is currently going on, and I hope that next time we talk, I can tell you, look, Landos has open offices and has open facilities in New York City. We are not there yet, but we hope to be there soon.
Okay, well, I think, I'm actually going to probably take you up on that. We started a program last year called the Emerging Companies Summit, which we did in partnership with the New York Stock Exchange. This year we held it in concert with the annual meeting last year in the spring. Obviously, we haven't had the ability to do that in person this year, but we're looking at ways of bringing some of that online virtually and potentially holding it in person later in the year. However, we will probably do something online from a digital standpoint of bringing some of these companies in. So perhaps the next time you talk to us, we'll have something that is much more akin to a company presentation, and you can go deeper into the nuts and bolts of Landos. Mary, we have 5 minutes left, and one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we got to today was pitch day, right? And we have a couple of other questions here about the way the eLab's role may change within the city's landscape, and what are kind of some of the effects of the pandemic on what you think you're going to see. But I want you to be able to talk a little bit about pitch day, because it's coming up next week. It's really the culmination of of this round of entrepreneurs and their experiences. So what are some of the things that you've done with Pitch Day in taking it virtual, and how are you trying to help some of these folks get a little bit more exposure?
Sure. Well, a couple of things. One, we looked at a lot of virtual pitch days, and we thought that we saw a really great model in a format that allowed for one-on-one connections, because that's what eLab's known for. It's known for its connections on the part of the participants, who they can meet at Pitch Day. So we've created, and it's going live today, an event page that allows you to book 15-minute times with any of the presenters. So we've done that specifically to facilitate people connecting as they would after their presentation. We're really happy to have come up with that. We've been electronic in our handout, or a Pitch Day event book since the beginning. So that'll stay the same. But I think
so let me just, I'll stop you there for a second. So you have a link that's going to allow investors to book time with the entrepreneurs via Pitch Day. That's fantastic. I mean, it's one of the things it's basically creating that better follow-up. So for anybody who's on the webinar and is in the investor set, we will actually have that as part of our LinkedIn post, and we will tweet that link out a bit later to the folks that are most appropriate. We'll help you get that out there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you. We have 3 minutes left, and I think this is the best way to close this.
Yeah, the other thing we've done is, look, people are used to practicing pitching in front of an auditorium, and the auditoriums have gotten bigger. And we, this year, have a very different format. They're going to be recording their pitch. We've gotten them coaching, not only in how to run a video conference, but how to record themselves, what kind of equipment they ought to have, and we've gotten them video pitch coaching. So this is a very, very different setup, and I've been seeing some of the ones coming in. They look great. It's a wonderful, wonderful group of entrepreneurs. Not only have they come through a lot of the typical trials and tribulations of figuring out what do you do with this innovation, and how do you respond to these onslaught of questions from experienced people about what you're doing to make this a commercial enterprise. But they have dealt with coming home and homeschooling while they're also running a startup, and they're seeing clinical trials go on hold because people have got a lot better things to do and taking care of all of us. There is there's been a lot of, a quarter of the people in the program are actual practicing clinicians. So they have had to learn how to do telemedicine in the middle of our program. They've been working at hospitals, taking care of people. So, and people have gotten sick and people around them have died. It's, this is the center of all of this happening in New York. And so we are with a group that has just shown incredible resilience. They've stepped up. We have not lost anybody in the program, which is incredible. There are a number of people. Yeah, there are a number of people who have actually changed their business. Vadim Gordon is part of the personal protective equipment startup that's now manufacturing in 4 states and in Canada. They were making 100,000 masks a week, 3 weeks in. So, this is just an incredibly impressive group of people.
Well, listen, over the last 8 years, it's been amazing to see where things have gone. You've taken something from nothing and built it into, really such a key part of the community. And, Josep, we can't be happier to see folks like you having success out of here. And, honestly, we hope you come back to New York, and I'm excited to, if you're available, to have you as part of our emerging company showcase. So thanks both of you for coming on. I want to give a little teaser for next week. We have Barbara Murphy, who's the chair of medicine at Mount Sinai. who's going to come on and be our guest and can talk about, she's been involved in starting companies. She's been involved in an amazing academic environment, and certainly in and around the response to COVID-19. 2 weeks from now, we have Daphne Zohar, who's the founder and CEO of PureTech Health, which is now a publicly traded venture fund out of Massachusetts. So, again, thanks everybody for coming. We've been really fortunate to start this new way of reaching people, and we're excited to see it keep growing. So thanks to both of you for coming on the day after the long weekend, and thanks for everybody that was able to join us. We're going to sign off and see you next week for Barbara Murphy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to New York Bio's virtual breakfast series. Join us every Tuesday at 9 a.m. for more discussions with leaders from across the healthcare spectrum. For more information on New York Bio, please visit us at www.newyorkbio.org.